Hello and welcome to the Service to School Stories podcast. You'll hear from veterans and partners who'll share their stories and insights about how you can use higher education to transition from the military and achieve your goals. Now let's get going.
Welcome to Service to School Stories, the podcast where we help service members and veterans navigate the path from military to higher education and highlight the stories of those who've made it that journey successfully. And I'm your host, Whitney Cason, Director of VetLink. Today, we're talking with someone whose path is both inspiring and pretty instructive, Luke Hixson. Luke served in the United States Navy as a corpsman. After completing his service, he decided to continue that mission of helping others, but this time through medicine. With the help of Service to School, Luke was accepted to Princeton University, one of the most selective undergraduate institutions in the country, and he thrived there as a veteran student, and his academic journey didn't stop after earning his degree. He was actually recently admitted to Rutgers Medical School, where he's now training to become a physician. In today's episode, we'll talk about Luke's transition from Navy to college and his experience as along the way. So Luke, welcome to Service to School Stories. It's great to have you.
Hey, no, thanks for having me on, Whitney.
So let's start, of course, with your time in the Navy. Tell me all about it.
Yes, so I graduated high school in 2015, and I was 17 at the time, graduated my junior year of high school fairly well, but at the time I didn't really like Common Core. I didn't like the idea of college, and my family couldn't really afford it. And I also just wanted to kind of get the hell out of Tennessee. And so I enlisted in the Navy 1 year later. 9 days after I turned 18, I shipped off to boot camp, did my year of medical training, and then was eventually attached with a Marine Corps infantry unit, Victor 15 out in Camp Pendleton. And I loved it. Grunts are a bunch of rowdy gentlemen. And I was able to practice medicine with a limited scope of practice, of course. But being able to treat Marines and be their caretaker over the next 4 years really boosted my confidence. And that showed me hey, medicine is right for me. I like to thrive in high-paced environments. I like having responsibility over the physical and mental health of Marines and sailors. And that's when I realized, okay, I need to get out. There are enlisted to officer programs in the Navy where they could have paid for me to get a bachelor's and then through med school. But for me, I thought the best choice forward was to just get out of the Navy and go to college.
Okay, so let's kind of talk a little bit about that. You said that you didn't like Common Core in high school, and as a fellow Tennessean, I completely understand. Did you do well in high school, or how was that academically for you?
I did quite well. My high school GPA was a 4.4. I graduated salutatorian about a graduating class of 500. And so I was good at school. I just didn't like it. And it felt like with standardized testing, it's my opinion that that's one metric to judge someone's amazingness, their intellectual capability. And I was good at it. Maybe I should have taken my SAT, ACTs. I actually ended up walking out of my ACT and all my AP exams because I was already sworn into the Navy. And so I just wrote my name on them and walked out. And that was me trying to raise my fist at the sky. And that ended up kind of kicking me in my ass coming to Princeton, because I could have transferred in some credits instead of taking Princeton calculus.
Yeah, those AP exams, you forget that they have some value whenever you go to get to college. And I completely agree. I'm not a fan of standardized testing and different things like that, both from my own, personal experience with them, but also, as a former teacher, I don't think that they're the best metric. It just shows your ability to potentially memorize. So then you did not, and this is my favorite thing to demystify, because everybody knows somebody who went in as a first year. Luke Hixson, you are a rarity. You really did go into Princeton as a first year. How do you think that you were able to do that?
I think in high school, I had demonstrated academic excellence clearly. But I think the VetLink addendum, I applied through Service to School, and I applied to a lot of their partnership VetLink schools. And the VetLink addendum like really highlighted and allows you to show your military excellence, aside from your academic excellence. And so even though it had been 5 years since I had been in a traditional classroom, I was able to show that I was honor grad of Corps School. I was honor grad of Field Medical School, and I had won these awards for saving this Marine's life. And I think that's the beauty of the VetLink addendum is it allows you to show excellence that could still be considered academic, but isn't your traditional sit in a classroom, you got straight A's type deal.
So you mentioned that you didn't enjoy school. You walked out of your AP exams and everything else. How did you show Princeton? Again, I understand using the VetLink addendum in every ways, but how did you show them, even through your essays, that you were now ready for stepping into the college classroom, that your mindset had
This, I think,
changed?
right. No, this is super important. I think a lot of it, the benefit of being an older student applying to college is you can rely on your real world experience. And with that, you can show maturity. In my essays, like I didn't out myself and say like, oh, I was this disgruntled high schooler who wanted nothing to do with college. Like I didn't show them those cards, but instead, like I showed them, okay, this is what I did in the military. These are the lessons I've learned. And through the essays, like you're able to show that maturity of understanding, okay, I want to be a doctor because of these lived experiences. And like I had a mentor, Dr. Christopher Belair. He was a second year med student at Mount Sinai when he was assigned to me. And that man, I owe him everything for working with me for all my college applications. And he's now a resident down at Georgetown in orthopedics surgery.
Amazing. So you knew at the very beginning of your applications that your end goal was to become a doctor. So how did you kind of use that to, one, kind of like pick an undergraduate institution? And then also, did you kind of already have your sights set on the type of medical programs or, medical universities that you wanted to go to?
I think I didn't really have, like, I didn't know what med schools I wanted to go to, because for me, any med school, once you get your MD, like you're a doctor. And having coming from Princeton, like I've had enough of the prestige. And so I wasn't really gunning for any particular med school. But when it came to choosing undergraduate institutions, I think one thing that's important is med school is about $350,000 to $400,000 in debt. And so if I could choose a undergraduate institution in which I could attend for free, like that was going to be my main driver, and save my GI Bill for med school. And so right now at Rutgers, I think I'm the only one who hasn't pulled out any loans and won't have to pull out any loans. And I get my monthly housing stipend. And then I also receive disability pay, which supplements the bills and food. And Princeton, out of all the other schools I got accepted into, Princeton was the only one that said, we'll pay for you to come here. And so throughout all 4 years at Princeton, like I was able to save a couple grand each academic year. And for me, that was a no-brainer.
Amazing. So it was strategic in many ways because you knew what your end goal was going to be. When did you start planning for med school? Like, how did you start setting yourself up for med school?
So most of these undergraduate institutions have like a pre-health advising entity. And so it's a bunch of administrators that help students that are interested in becoming physicians or dentists to navigate that whole process. So coming into Princeton, I had no idea when I should take the MCAT, what classes I should take. And so the first thing I did freshman year was meet with, at Princeton, it's called Health Professions Advising. And about once per semester, I would just pop in their building and just sit with them and talk to them and say, am I on track? What classes should I take? Ooh, I struggled a little bit with molecular biology. Is it smart for me to take biology 2 with a lab while I'm taking biochemistry? And so for them, like they've seen students be successful taking 3 of the pre-med prereqs in one semester. But given that I was a non-traditional student, I kind of had a 5-year hiatus. Like they were able to tell me like, hey, like take it slower, ease into it a little bit more. And so I really leaned on like the school's resources for pre-meds to navigate the whole process.
Incredibly important, but I'm so glad that you also knew about those resources, knew where to obviously locate them. And I'm pretty positive that if you didn't know where those resources were, you had somebody that you could reach out to within Princeton, at least, to be able to put you in the right direction to the right person. Um, okay, so then knowing this, when did you start preparing to be able to take your MCAT?
So there are multiple ways to get into medical school. And so the traditional path is to around your junior or senior year is you take the MCAT. And the MCAT is about a 7.5 hour exam, and it tests your knowledge on all your pre-medical prerequisites. And your pre-medical prerequisites are chemistry 1, chemistry 2, bio 1, bio 2, physics 1, physics 2, calculus, stats, biochemistry, organic chemistry 1, organic chemistry 2. And the majority of those classes also have 3-hour labs. And the problem with that is you space those classes out over your 4 years. And so by the time you're taking the MCAT, hopefully you've taken all of them. And there are some situations where students haven't, and so that delays them, and then they're forced to take a gap year because they waited until their senior year to fulfill one of those requirements. For me, or I guess another pathway are early assurance programs. And early assurance programs typically are you are eligible for them after your first year, your freshman year. And so sophomore year, you're able to apply to early assurance programs. And because Princeton doesn't have a med school, they partner with multiple med schools in the region. And so Princeton has a partnership with UPenn School of Medicine, with the Thomas Jefferson School of Medicine, as well as Rutgers. And so during sophomore year, the pre-med advisors said like, hey, you should apply for them. And the main key of knowing if you're a good candidate to apply to these early assurance programs is within 1 year of your academics, have you demonstrated an interest in medicine? And I kind of cheated because I had 5 years of being a Navy corpsman. And so I had already saved lives. I had already treated patients. I had already worked closely with doctors. And that put me above my peers who maybe had shadowed a physician once or who pushed geriatrics in a wheelchair in a hospital. And my applications to the early assurance programs are more convincing because I have more experience. And so Princeton, I applied to the Princeton partnership program with Rutgers my sophomore year. I got accepted. And during my sophomore summer, I shadowed or I attended like a 6-week program at Robert Wood Johnson Medical School, which is Rutgers. And that 6-week program is kind of like an accelerated med school program. And so like we have exams and we get thrown a bunch of knowledge at us, and it's like, can we retain it? Can we keep up? We also do anatomy-based cadaver labs. And after that, the med school decides if they want you to apply. And because I had gotten into Princeton without a standardized test, told me like, hey, we want you to take the MCAT because we need a test. And so it was coming into my junior year that I realized, okay, I'm going to have to take this MCAT by the end of my senior year.
Had you, at that point, did you have all of the courses and things that you needed to be able to be prepared for the MCAT?
By the end of junior year, I did. And so I had worked with the pre-med advisors to fit in my schedule all the pre-med prereqs so that by like fall semester of senior year, I would be able to take the MCAT. And it took me 2 tries, which I think that was probably the hardest part of undergrad for me was being so close to my dreams and then failing and then having to recover and bounce back from that on top of the senior thesis, on top of graduating and finishing my neuroscience classes.
That's a lot to deal with. I'm sure that caused some internal turmoil and everything else. How did you not quit? Like, how did you continue to persevere and push through?
I didn't do it myself. I had messaged Dr. Belair, and he kind of gave it to me straight. He said, like, I know it sucks, but you're right there. Like dig a little deeper and keep going because it's going to pay off rather than having to take a gap year. And also just the Princeton veteran community, a bunch of close buddies of mine at Princeton, like I shared with them like my failure and like I was like looking up other jobs. Should I go into law enforcement? Should I just buy a van and go backpacking across the US? Like maybe this doctor thing isn't for me. And it was me leaning on my friends who had my best interest in their minds and they said keep going. And that gave me enough juice, so to speak, to be able to retake the MCAT my spring semester of senior year.
Clearly you passed.
I did.
And I remember you having those conversations with Sean and being shocked as well to find out that you were considering not becoming a doctor for even just a split second. But we understand, like, that happens. It's just par for the course of, being challenged, incredibly challenged to, to reach your goals. Let's kind of dive a little bit into that whole Princeton piece there, because you mentioned the Princeton veterans. Let's talk about your experience transitioning from the Navy and into Princeton. How was that?
It was a nightmare. My first probably full year, my freshman year, I had no clue what I was doing. I remember sitting in my first chemistry lecture, and we're already talking about p orbitals, s orbitals, and you have to remember that your peers at these institutions are coming fresh out of high school, typically coming fresh off of AP classes, and for them taking chemistry, this is a refresher, and they just took this last year. And for me, I was looking at a periodic table and I didn't know how to read it. I didn't know how to, like, I'd forgotten everything I had learned in high school. And because of that, I felt behind. I experienced a lot of imposter syndrome, and I was like, holy shit, like this is just for one class. Like I have so many more other STEM classes I have to take where I have to build a foundation that I don't have. And for that, I relied on just friends, traditional students. And so one of my good friends, Anna, she was initially pre-med with me, and she took me under her wing. I remember staying up in the wee hours of the mornings, and she would be like, "Okay, Luke, like when you have a chemistry lab, you need to come prepared. This is how you come prepared. Here's how I schedule my week." And for 2, 3 weeks, she and I were studying together for everything, and that kind of oriented me into, okay, this is what a pre-med student should be doing. And I don't think if I hadn't asked her for that, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. And I think that's a huge thing that a lot of veterans struggle with, is being able to ask for help. Coming off the military, like you were the subject matter expert in your MOS, and asking for help was a sign of weakness, and it showed that you were incompetent. And college doesn't work that way. And as much as pre-meds get the stigma that we're super competitive, at Princeton, I experienced everyone was super collaborative. And so that, I think, attributed to my success and transition into Princeton.
So you didn't just ask for help. You wound up asking for help from essentially a freshman undergraduate student, a traditional freshman. So probably about 18, 19-year-old, taught you
Yep.
how to be a student again. I can only
Yes.
imagine that was a bit of a humbling experience there. But I'm incredibly glad that you did that, because I have no doubt, knowing your work ethic and everything that you've put into this, I know that it transformed your experience, and really, like, you have done amazing things about being able to structure yourself while you were at Princeton. How did you have a social life while you were there?
This is a great question. I'm a huge advocate that non-traditional students, transfers, veterans need to humble themselves and realize that like just because you're older doesn't mean that you can't have a social life. You need to integrate with the traditional student body. And so like that was one of my biggest goals at Princeton is how do I get involved with like regular clubs? And sure, I might be the oldest one in the room, but so what? Like, what does that mean? And I struggle with it a little because maybe like the optic of it doesn't look too good if you're at a party and you're the oldest one and everyone else maybe might not be of age. Like, okay, the optics of that doesn't look great. But at Princeton, like I was able to get involved socially by joining one of the eating clubs my sophomore year. And if you don't know, the eating clubs are essentially co-ed frat sororities where you like they provide parties as well as eating all your meals there, and then also provide that social environment.
So did you, knowing about the eating clubs, did you feel kind of like a token vet, or did you really feel integrated into them? Like you were just part of it?
Both. My first 2 years, I felt like I was part of it because I was part of the Glorious Tiger Inn, which is one of the bigger clubs. And at that time, around maybe 2022, 2023, there were most veterans were in there. And when I say most, I mean like six. A lot of veterans didn't go join the eating clubs because maybe of the stigma that they were a bit older. But for me, like the fact that Tiger Inn had most of the veterans, like that was my community within Tiger Inn. Like I felt welcome because there were other people that shared my experience. Come senior year, like a lot of those veterans had graduated, and like I had made the mistake of always befriending people that weren't in my grade and always years ahead of me. And so come senior year, like I hadn't really gotten super close with my own class years. And so senior year, along with some personal stuff that had happened in my life, like I felt a little alienated. And so I withdrew from the eating club my senior year, and that ended up working out because I was able to focus on what I needed to, which was my senior thesis and the MCAT.
Knowing you, having known you for a few years now, I'm going to ask a question that you probably weren't expecting, but I also know that we deal with a lot of younger service members who maybe have done one contract and are now going to college. How did you navigate being single and dating while you were at Princeton?
Yeah, that's interesting because I was in a long distance relationship freshman year, sophomore year, junior year. And because of that, like I respected like my partner at the time. And so like I was very mindful of, okay, I'm not going on any coffee chats with like any like girls, just me and them. For parties, in general, I respected our relationship. And after we ended things off, like senior year, like I was single, but like I didn't do anything. I didn't pursue anyone. And a lot of, at least from my friends at Princeton, um, who were single for the most part, they either, it's two ways. They either completely go off the rails and they're single and ready to mingle with everyone, or they completely like go for the graduate students. And that's perfectly fine. I think college is a place where like you can maybe find the love of your life. But a lot of veterans, at least from what I've heard, is like their age gap is in their head. They're always thinking about that, and so because of that, like they don't try to pursue partners that are 5 years younger than them.
Smart. But also, it's always important to remember that you're brought to these campuses and universities to kind of help diversify the student body population. So it's always important to be mindful of optics as well whenever you're navigating a lot of these situations. So being mindful of the entire situation is really incredibly important. But also, I just want to put a disclaimer out there for any females or any females that are listening. Luke is still single. So if anybody would like to get on the ground floor of Dr. Luke Hixson, let us know. He's available.
We got 10 years in the making. If you can wait 10 years.
It's an investment. You have to invest early. And I'm sure there's somebody out there who would like to be able to invest in Dr. Luke Hixson. So
Thank you for
now
being my wing woman.
I'm a great wing woman. So let's go back kind of to the early assurance program. What was there an application to this? Like, can you kind of talk us through what the early assurance was?
Yeah, so like an early assurance program is essentially you being notified your sophomore year or at the end of your sophomore year, like, okay, we are reserving the seat at our med school for you. And that takes a lot of stress off of pre-meds, because in order to be a competitive like med school student during your application, you not only have to do well academically on all your pre-med courses, you also have to have X amount of clinical hours. You have to have X amount of volunteer hours. You have to have X amount of extracurriculars where you've demonstrated leadership. And so the academics is just one piece of it. And what early assurance programs provide is halfway through your undergraduate career, you're in. You don't have to worry about anything else. And that allows you to truly focus, whether you're interested in research or you're interested in maybe more like a dance group or something like that, truly allows you to set aside and prioritize something else that you otherwise wouldn't have been able to. And for me, the Rutgers Early Assurance Program with Princeton, there is an application process. It was a Google Doc form, and it was essentially saying, how do you know that you want to be a doctor? And that goes back to what I was saying earlier. It's like, if you're a 68 whiskey, a Navy corpsman, an IDC, or maybe you were TCCC trained or CLS, like that is such a unique medical experience that no other traditional student is going to have. And so I just applied, and I think 6 like students were accepted into the Rutgers program, and then I was the only like non-traditional student.
And then did you know about this early assurance program before applying to Princeton?
I knew vaguely that Princeton had early assurance programs, and so coming into it, I knew I wanted to at least give it a shot because of the experience. Different early assurance programs have different like there are different flavors of early assurance programs. And so for instance, the UPenn early assurance program, they really want to see like a 3.8 GPA. And I'm letting you know, after my freshman year, I did not have a 3.8. In fact, I had to write an addendum to Rutgers to be eligible for the early assurance program with them. And because I was like 0.2, 0.3 points off, and they said, okay, we'll round you up to our minimum, but just know, like, by the end of your time at Princeton, you need to be above a 3.4. And I'm like, okay, we can make that happen. And so call it luck, call it an awakening. But like after getting accepted into the program, like I knew this was an opportunity that I couldn't just let slip out of my hands.
You knew the benchmark. You had
Yes.
you had an idea of where you couldn't fall below at this point. Or at least,
Correct.
you knew that you had to work to make that standard. And how would another person go about finding out, what all of the other early assurance programs are? Like, how do you have any advice for somebody who is like, well, I know immediately I want med school. They haven't applied to an undergraduate yet. How do you think they could go about figuring this out for themselves?
Yeah, so if you Google BS MD programs or early assurance programs for med school, there are websites, like I think Med School Coach is one that have compiled these lists. Now understand, some of them are 8-year programs where you apply to their undergrad, and if you get accepted, you also are immediately accepted into their med school. And so upon application to undergrad, you're also applying to their med school. And that's assuming that you maintain like a 3.7, 3.8. And those requirements can change depending on the med school. Others are programs where, okay, let's say that I apply to X college my sophomore year. Only students that are sophomores at that undergrad school can then apply during their sophomore year to that institution's med school. And so that's kind of what Princeton offers is you don't apply into Princeton to also get into Rutgers. It's you apply to Princeton, and then after your sophomore year, then you'll apply to the 3 different early assurance programs available.
It's really important to know, the options and stuff that are out there. Um, so let's talk about med school. How has that transition? Because you didn't have a whole lot of time between graduating from Princeton and starting med school. It was a lot of a very short time gap for you. So how has that transition been?
It's been great. I wish I had a little bit more time in between. I think I had maybe a month off in between graduating and then starting med school. But it's been great. I think not the problem, but one thing to know about Princeton is that you will always be taught at a theoretical level. And so your homework, also known as problem sets, isn't going to be multiple choice for the most part. It's going to be higher order critical thinking. And so instead of asking like, oh, what does this part of the brain do? It's going to ask a question that requires you to understand the brain and then do a second or third order question on that. And it's very theoretical, essentially. And the transition to med school isn't theoretical at all. It's just brute memorization and understanding. And I love that because it took a lot of stress off. Because I was like, holy cow, I've heard med school is this really hard thing. They say that it's like drinking water through a fire hydrant. And it is. My first exam, we had almost 2,000 lecture slides that were testable. But thankfully, every question was multiple choice, and so you're able to use study strategies to eliminate certain ones. And I think the way at least Rutgers does it is they give us a lot of resources, and so it's not just lecture slides that we're relying on to study. We also have Anki cards, which are like digital flashcards. We have like other videos we can use, and then we also have practice exams, practice questions. And so the learning style is multidimensional in med school, and I think that really helps. Is instead of just sitting in front of a computer for 8 hours a day reviewing lecture slides, you're able to mix up the different study methodologies.
Your grad school is obviously vastly different from undergrad. You're not the only non-traditional student in med school, but you are the only service member, if I'm in your particular cohort, correct?
Correct.
And how has it been integrating into this new group?
It's been awesome. I think there are students that have already gotten their PharmD. So they've already went to grad school, and then now they're pivoting careers and then going through the gauntlet of med school and then residency and then fellowship. And so like there are students that are closer to my age. There's also a student who was a former police officer, and I think that is mind blowing. And there are students who got their masters, others are in like MD, PhD programs. And so that's been really cool because I think there's an understanding going into medical school that we're not competing against each other. And so how well I do on one exam doesn't dictate how well you do. And because of that, everyone is super collaborative and always interested to know each other's stories on why did you choose medicine? And I think with med school, at least, you're building like a repertoire of future physicians that you can rely on because medicine is very specialized. So like, for instance, I'm interested in trauma surgery or emergency medicine. But let's say one day in the ED, I have a patient with gyno issues. I didn't do a residency in gyno, but I might have friends or colleagues that are residents in gyno that I could just message. And so like at least for me, I'm entering med school with that mindset is everyone could be a future colleague. And everyone can bring something to the table.
Amazing. So you've been an ambassador for us for a few years. I believe you're on hold for the exact moment, but is there any kind of advice that you would give to a service member who maybe hasn't started the process? Maybe they do want med school in the future. What advice would you give them?
Two pieces of advice. One is going to be in your essays, show, don't tell. For all the previous applicants I've worked on, that is probably the hardest thing for like a new applicant to realize is don't just say like, oh, I was a Navy corpsman and I want to go into medical school. That's not entertaining and that's not higher order thinking. If you tell a story about a time where you treated a wounded Marine or you were able to recognize XYZ symptoms and get a Marine or sailor the physical care they needed, like that is more eye-opening. And the admissions can get more about you, about who you are from you telling a story rather than just saying flat out, I was a medic and I want to go into medicine. So show, don't tell. And then my second piece of advice is after that process happens and you're in a school, read those essays again. Remind yourself why you're doing the things you're doing. And this is something that I've seen is some veterans will come into an institution and say like, I want to be a doctor. I want to be pre-med. And then they lose sight of that because they're taking organic chemistry, they're taking chemistry, and then they pivot to a different major, an easier major. And I think there's a difference between not having resilience and knowing what you want to do versus finding like a true new passion that you've been exposed to. And I would just encourage like all applicants once they get into college, remember the reason why you're going to college and maintain that grit, maintain that resiliency. Because at the end of the day, those essays weren't a lie. And you might regret kind of self-selecting out halfway through that process.
Incredibly important words, especially for students that know that they are probably going to have to go the distance in academia. And it'll take more than just the 4 years at an undergrad. It could take you all the way to a PhD, which takes, 5 to 7 years. Your story is incredibly inspirational. And I hope that it, gives service members something that they think to really think about. I also really, truly want to emphasize, Luke, having the ability to be able to go in as a first year to an elite college is incredibly rare. It is not something that we necessarily hear or see on a regular basis. You, Luke, had a lot going for you in your high school experience, of course, being also salutatorian, having an amazing GPA, having a lot of the academics that schools were looking for. And this was coupled with then your experience as a corpsman and the education that you had to take on while you were in the military. And you were able to synthesize it down beautifully with your VetLink addendum. For those of you that are kind of curious about that, if you ask your advisor for a link to our how to fill out the VetLink addendum, Luke's is one that I have highlighted because I thought that it spoke beautifully to the academic aspect of learning to become a corpsman. But also, keep in mind that not every service member is alike and not every backstory is alike. So don't compare yourself to Luke. Don't have the expectation that you have to go in as a first year. Most of the time, probably about 90% of the time or more, we are going to see service members have to transfer in. They're going to have to get those academics at a community college or another institution before then transferring to a more elite institution. So do understand that not every path is linear. It is vastly different for everybody. Luke, as I said, your story is an inspiration, of course, not just because you went to Princeton and are now at Rutgers Med School, but because of your purpose and your perseverance behind your journey. You've shown that discipline, compassion, and that you learned in the service, and of course, can translate into an incredible success in your higher education and beyond. For our listeners, if you're a veteran dreaming of an elite school, Princeton or not, take a page from Luke's story. Use the resources that are available. Reach out to your service school advisors, your ambassadors, lean on them. And of course, use the resources that are available to you. Don't be afraid to ask for help, to include maybe from your 18-year-old, 19-year-old peer students. They can give you a lesson or two in how to be a successful student. And of course, if you aren't following Luke's journey on social media, you probably should. He actually has a TikTok and Instagram. Doc to Doctor?
Doc to Doctor, that's
Doc
right.
to Doctor. Follow him, follow his journey, and see what he is doing as he, goes from being a corpsman to Princeton undergrad to now Dr. Luke Hixson. And of course, ladies, like I said, get in on the groundwork if you want to. He, invest early. And of course, that's it for this episode of Service to School Stories. I'm Whitney Cason. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
That's all we have for this episode. Join us next week, same time, same place, where we share more Service to School stories. Service to School Stories is hosted by Sydney Mathis, Chief Program Officer, and Alec Emmert, Service to School CEO. Our podcast is produced and edited by our Director of Communication, Amanda Tobias. Service to School is a 501c3 nonprofit providing free college admission support to transitioning service members and veterans. Join us next week and follow us for more on your favorite social media platforms.